Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to Edgenova's Winter Wellness Webinar Series. So we're really excited to have you join us this afternoon. And on behalf of Edgenova, my name is Jennifer Westman, and my colleague Aris Hernandez, who is behind the scenes, would like to formally welcome you. And we're really excited to have Dr. David Pilon here today to kick off the first of our winter webinar series. And this series will take place from now until March. We'll have different webinars throughout the upcoming months, really focused on different aspects of health and wellness, specifically for international students. So to begin, I just wanted to provide an introduction about Edgenova for those of you who are not familiar with us. So Edgenova is a nonprofit cooperative that was founded in 2004. And we're an association of education and training providers. So what that means is that we have a membership based, and our members include our 10 universities in the province, our 14 campuses with Nova Scotia Community College, our K-12 members, both public and private, and of course the 5 language schools in Nova Scotia as well. So we're supported by these member institutions, as well as the government in Nova Scotia through Labour and Advanced Education, and the government of Canada through Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agencies. And 2 of the areas that we're really focused on working together in is international student recruitment as well as retention. So you may have heard about our Atlantic Canada Study and Stay programs. So aside from that, we're really excited today to be offering this webinar series. And here you can just see a snapshot of our members. And we also just wanted to remind you that we do have several webinars that we offered in last spring and summer, which you may want to check out, some COVID-19 resources. And we'll be sharing these PowerPoint slides after as well with you, so you can check them out there. A couple of housekeeping reminders for Zoom. So you all have a few features. If you just wave your mouse or, at the bottom of your screen, you should see a chat, a raise your hand, and a Q&A. So for the purpose of today, we invite you to use the chat box as well as the Q&A, and we'll be monitoring those, and David will be answering them throughout and also after as well. So we won't be using the raise your hand feature, I believe, David, unless we didn't quite talk about that. We don't usually do it, but it's there. We usually do Q&A or chat. And with no further ado, because I know we're limited in time, it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. David Pilon, who is Director of Counselling and Psychological Services at Dalhousie Student Health and Wellness. So today he's going to speak to all of you about the challenges that many of you face as international students during the pandemic, and the role and impact of stress on mental health, well-being, and the importance of coping and resilience. So he'll be providing some practical coping and resiliency tips, as well as many wellness resources for you throughout this presentation. So with no further ado, David, it's a pleasure.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Aris, to both of you for inviting me to participate today. And it is my pleasure to be connecting with our international students and friends from around the province. I am going to bring my slide up, and I trust that you can see my title slide, Jennifer. Perhaps you can just confirm.
Yeah, looks great.
Wonderful, thank you. One of the reasons I so enjoy my job and my role here at Dalhousie University is because it really gives me the chance to connect with, in many ways, an entire segment of our world. Certainly, within our university, we have students from over 120 different countries of the world, which is a pretty broad sampling when you consider the countries of the world. And no doubt there are students from even more countries when we consider all of the other schools in the province. And the other aspect of that is just a delight for me is that on a day-to-day basis, I get to interact with students, oftentimes young people, but not always young, who are at such a wonderful time in their life when they are doing all that they can to pursue their studies, to dream about their futures, to think about everything that you are going to contribute to the world. And so for me and my colleagues here at Dalhousie Student Health and Wellness, that is an opportunity to connect with something that is really inspired And it is really, I'm so fortunate. So it is a pleasure to connect with this broader group here today. And there we go. So the focus today is really going to be starting somewhat broad in terms of some of the stresses and challenges of being a student today, of which there are many. And while it is a lovely and wonderful and exciting and privileged opportunity, there are challenges and there are stresses that come with it, particularly these days in this era of a pandemic. Everything has been altered in so many ways. And then we'll be placing on top of that some of the challenges that are unique to international students. And we'll be talking about these challenges, these stressors, and the role that they have on one's health, well-being, and mental health. Because we're talking about stress and challenges, it's absolutely a responsibility to really start to then turn the focus to the importance of coping. And what does one need to do to really develop coping strategies and tools and to strengthen one's ability and capacity to do what they need to do to cope with those challenges? And really a word that you'll hear me speak to today frequently is a sense of resilience, that sense of being able to grow and develop and strengthen something, so that one is even in a better position to be able to respond to whatever challenges that may come down the road. So we'll be talking about very practical coping and resiliency tips and strategies today, and I'll share a few resources for international students as well. I trust there will be time for questions at the end, and if anything that I'm saying perhaps isn't quite clear or one has a burning question, please put it in the question or chat box. And Jennifer will monitor that, and by all means, Jennifer, feel more than free to interrupt and to insert that question or comment. Okay. So this is the understatement of the year. It is not easy being a student these days. And even though I haven't been a student for a while, I do have the pleasure of interacting with students on a daily basis. And I remember all of my years of being a student. And as much as I may wish to forget at times some of the stresses and challenges that I experienced all those years ago, including spending some years here at Dalhousie University as an undergraduate, those images, those memories are still with me. And many of them are wonderful memories, but some of the stresses and challenges, of course, are with me as well. And when I went to select some of these images for this particular slide, did you know that if you Google student, stress, and images, you get something like 67 million different images to choose from, many of which we could all relate to, but these were the ones that came to the top of the list for me. I trust you can relate to some of those things, because when you think about it, all of these images convey a sense of stress and challenge that at times is the other side of the coin when it comes to being a student. Of course, the flip side of that coin is excitement, is potential, is dreaming about the future, it's about learning and growing and launching your careers, and we shouldn't lose sight of that. So even though we're talking about stress, there are many wonderful aspects of this opportunity to be a student today. Now, I would be curious to know what might be particularly stressful for international students. So if I could ask you maybe just for whatever comes to mind, if you put into the chat box something that you might consider to be stressful for you. So I'll give you a moment to do that. Jennifer and I will look at this screen here to see what comes in. The student permit, okay, there we go. Balancing schoolwork with part-time work, of course. Sometimes one doesn't always have the opportunity just to be studying. Are there other stresses and challenges for some of you? Schedules and all of the required tasks. I can certainly understand that one. We hear from students all the time these days in online teaching that the workload seems much more than what it used to be with in-person teaching. A few other comments here. Constantly worrying about being able to afford school fees. Yes, financial concerns and international student fees. I appreciate what a challenge they are. Communicating in a foreign language, yes, and learning in a foreign language too. A lack of, I assume that is that sense of belonging. Yes, yes, so true. Any other challenges or stresses that come to mind for you as an international student? Wondering how quickly you'll find a job after you've done with school. Yes, the career, are there jobs out there, the future, where that will be, makes perfect sense that that would be a stress and a worry. Any others? Loneliness, of course, of course. Culture shock and how to manage that. Yes, so real, so true, particularly for students from other parts of the world. Okay, so that's a great collection of some sentiments or some things that you would consider to be stressful. Because I engage with a lot of international students, I was able to think of some things that may be stressful for international students. And many of the things that I've identified here are the ones that you've also identified. So being here in a foreign land, where perhaps for many of you, so many things are all about new ways of doing. Missing home, missing family, missing friends, maybe missing what's familiar. And in this day and age, with online realities for most schools in Nova Scotia, that experience of making friends just has to happen in such a different way. And everyone, I appreciate, wants to do well when they come to university and college. And you all have expectations for yourselves. But I suspect the people who care about you, your family, your friends, your loved ones, have expectations too. And sometimes those expectations can seem very, very significant, very daunting. Because so many of our international students truly do reflect the world, and everywhere in the world, there may be challenges or crises or really difficult situations back home that you're worried about, that you're concerned about. Language barriers, as was mentioned, as were financial concerns and funding, career path, and where will the future take me? All of these things you've identified, and dealing with uncertainty. Um, it's one thing for someone who's established in their career to have a little bit more sense, perhaps, of certainty when it comes to, well, chances are next month, next year, I'll be doing a similar sort of thing as I'm doing now. But when one is a student, when the chapter ahead is so uncertain, sometimes that's hard to deal with. Sometimes that's hard to coexist with. I can imagine worrying about friends and family back home and how they're doing. And when you think about it, all of these things can impact your sleep. They can impact that ability late at night when you put your head on your pillow and close your eyes, just to be able to drift off comfortably, peacefully, without having things on your mind. That's not always easy to do when there's a lot of things on your mind. And when people don't sleep very well, then that certainly is a concern in terms of one's overall health and well-being. So hopefully this maybe captures what might be some of the many challenges or stresses or concerns of being an international student. Now, we have another way of identifying some of the stresses and concerns that students experience, and many schools in the province participate in what is called the National College Health Assessment. And this is something that is a very significant health survey that is supported by the American College Health Association, and many Canadian schools participate. And every 3 years, we here at Dalhousie, anyways, conduct this survey, And in 2019, just last year, we did the survey and we had over 1,300 students who responded. And because we're able to get the information back from the survey, specifically about our school, it gives us a good snapshot of what might be some of the experiences that our student body is having. So here's a few of them. In the past year, 73% of Dalhousie respondents to this survey said they felt overwhelming anxiety at some point. 52% felt so depressed that it was actually difficult to function in the past year. 14% seriously considered suicide, which is a scary and really worrisome thing to hear and to know. And 2.2% actually attempted to take their life in the past year. These are very concerning things when I get information like this, and we try to do all that we can to support our students as much as we possibly can to ensure that they have the supports, the resources, the treatment that they need. And I know all schools contribute to wanting to do that same thing. And also in the survey, ask questions about what actually has an impact on your academic performance. That is, how well are you doing at school? People said that stress impacted academic performance. 42% of people said stress impacted academic performance. 35% said anxiety did. 29% said sleep difficulties really impacted their performance. Depression was identified by 22%, and even relationship problems is not insignificant in terms of its impact. When you think about it, all of these things are barriers to academic success. And the reason you're here in the province, the reason you're participating in all the great study programs at the schools that you are, is because you are using this opportunity to become successful, to get your education, to use that as the springboard to all the wonderful things that you're going to do in life and in your career. So when we become concerned that students' health may be compromised, then it's a university's responsibility to do something about that, because we want our students to be well, because healthy students are better learners, and we want students to succeed in school so that they will move forward and do all the great things that they're going to do. So I share these findings with you from this survey simply to note that if you felt any particular concerns around anxiety, sadness, loneliness, isolation, sleep difficulties, and so on, you're not alone, because that's a common experience that these particular statistics convey. Now, all of that was before this. Now, who could have imagined? And I suspect as I show this slide to you, our friends from all over the world, you will immediately look to the part of the world that perhaps you're from, and that might give you a significant sense of dread or anxiety or apprehension. I mean, I look at this image of our world. This is our whole world. This is our planet. And when we see how much COVID has impacted and compromised and harmed and killed so many in so many places, it just hits me in the gut, as I'm sure it does for many of you as well. And I mean, COVID has had such an impact. So here we've been talking about the stresses and challenges of being a student today, of being an international student, and then add to that the impact that a global pandemic has had. Now, certainly the loss of lives and the impacts on families, that's the greatest impact. That's the unimaginable one that COVID has brought. But when it comes to school and your work here in the province, there are all of these other things that are no doubt more a part of your day-to-day life. For many of you, most of your courses have moved online, and that's just a very different reality than what it might otherwise be. And for those who identified language issues or perhaps learning not in your first language, it's a little harder to be doing this online than it is when you're in person in the classroom, and you can more easily, raise your hand and ask your professor or instructor to explain something or repeat something. When it comes to access to libraries and study areas, all of those things have changed with COVID. For some of you who might be in programs in which you're conducting research, research very much has been disrupted in all kinds of ways. We talked earlier about expectations, and it's hard to know in this era of COVID how much work one should be doing and how much is enough in terms of that sense of productivity. Many people I hear from have said that that sense is really skewed these days. For some of you, COVID will have impacted certain timelines in terms of finishing your research, finishing your degree, or perhaps for some funding that was time sensitive in terms of how long you might have that. It really has disrupted everything in such a day-to-day sense. And for some, in terms of impacts on housing or finances, part-time job security, we know those things have all been compromised with COVID. And my goodness, how do we experience a work-life balance, which I talk about all the time and did all the time before COVID, when so many of us are actually working from home? As a colleague put it to me in the early days of COVID, it doesn't seem so much like working at home, but it seems like living at work. And that sense of isolation that is so easy for any of us to feel as we truly are disconnected because of the public health guidance that we have to follow. It has increased and enhanced that sense of disconnection, of isolation, of loneliness. Of course, those things are going to impact relationships. And in terms of looking back at that slide of our global reality in terms of COVID, I can only imagine so many of you are really concerned about your family and your friends and loved ones back home. I've worked with students through the pandemic who are from other countries in the world who have shared with me their tremendous sense of anxiety and fear with respect to their relatives and family members who are in other countries, where perhaps things are not quite as in control from a public health perspective as they might be in our part of the world. So all of these things have had an impact, have had a significant impact. Now, if you notice something about my picture of the Earth there in that picture, the Earth is upside down because indeed COVID has turned the world upside down. So one can imagine that our ability to cope with all of this, to manage through all of this, can very easily become overwhelmed. It was challenging enough to be a student. It was additionally challenging to be an international student. And it's even more challenging to be an international student as we are living through a pandemic. So because of that, we really need to conclude that if we're experiencing stress and anxiety, it's normal. It is exactly what someone is supposed to be experiencing. And if I encountered a student who said, "Oh, it doesn't bother me, nothing's really an issue, it's all the same," I'd wonder a little bit about whether that student is really being truthful with themselves. Usually we think about grief as something we experience when we lose a loved one or lose a significant relationship. But I think grief is actually a very good word as we think about what it means to be living through a pandemic, because we really are grieving the loss of what used to be our previous day-to-day lives. And we're grieving the loss of feeling connected and seeing the people who we really want to see and spend our time with. So this is an absolutely normal, common feeling. If you're experiencing that, you're experiencing what is real in our world right now. And you're certainly not alone when it comes to feeling stressed, to feel a real sense of distress and discomfort. If you find that it's harder to concentrate, if your productivity is somewhat diminished, if you're having trouble sleeping, so are, excuse me, so many people right now. And in my books, when we experience stress, when we experience any of these reactions, it is absolutely okay to actually acknowledge that, to say, "I'm really worried," or "I'm kind of afraid," or "I'm really distressed right now." Now, I appreciate that it may be the case that in some of the cultures and countries and places where some of you come from, there may be different perceptions about stress, anxiety, and mental health and well-being. I'm aware of that. So I don't mean to suggest that the perspectives that are more familiar for you in any way are not valid and appropriate perspectives. But what I guess I am saying is that when we are challenged by and living with some really difficult things that really make us not feel so good, it's a very healthy thing to be able to say, and that's how I'm feeling. Now, as we'll come to share in a moment, sometimes stress isn't a bad thing because we need a little bit of stress to kind of get us moving, to motivate us, to sort of help us to pursue a situation in which we can grow from. But excessive stress, a lot of stress, certainly can be very concerning and can really have an impact. There's a nice way that I like to think about this, and this comes from the Mental Health Commission of Canada. And they've created what they call the mental health continuum. And as represented on these slides, there are these 4 zones, and not unintentionally, they go from the green healthy zone to the very severely disrupted red zone where everything just stops. And of course, you think about traffic lights. So in that green zone, we're going along, we're functioning as well as we need to in life, and everything is going relatively okay. That's not to say there aren't some, difficult moments or signs of stress, but we're able to continue to function in the way that we need to. But sometimes when some stressors increase or you experience more of them, they may start to disrupt your functioning in a mild way. They make it a little harder to stay focused on your studies. It may make it a little harder to fall asleep. You might find yourself a little more distracted, things like that. For the most part, those things can be turned around. You can kind of get back to the green baseline of normal healthy functioning. But sometimes some of those stresses, some of those challenges intensify even more, and they really start to significantly get in the way of your functioning. And that's when you move into the orange zone and things become much more moderately disrupted in terms of your functioning. It becomes harder to do some of the day-to-day things you might otherwise do. You may still get some of those things done and be able to take care of some things. But many other things really become impaired. And obviously, that's when one needs to be putting some attention to what do I need to do to get myself back to the yellow and the green zone. And sometimes, if some of those efforts actually don't work, people might become even more challenged or more undermined, if you will. And that's when someone moves into the red zone, in which we might start to experience something that we consider to be, an actual clinical disorder, a mental health disorder. Someone might have some very severe and persistent impairment to their functioning. It might be hard to do just about anything in the way that one used to do it. And in this red zone, that functioning is really severely disrupted. Now, the important thing to know is that this is a continuum. And like all continuums, no one has to be stuck at any one place on that continuum. One can move up the continuum if they start to experience stress and some of its impacts, and then one can move back down the continuum to that healthy zone if one is pursuing healthy coping strategies and taking good care of themselves, or getting some of the supports and resources at times, or even treatment that they might require. So I share this with you because I think it's really important to appreciate that sometimes we tend to think in terms of, I either have a problem, I am struggling, I am challenged, perhaps I'm experiencing, a mental disorder, or I am not. The continuum here suggests that all of those things can increase and they can decrease. It doesn't have to be a binary 2-category sort of thing. And indeed, this particular continuum was used with the Canadian military, and it very much helped them to appreciate when soldiers experience stress injuries as part of their combat and duty, that they may indeed find their functioning impaired, but they can actually also move back to a healthy green zone again. So when you move along that continuum, there may be particular signs or symptoms of stress that you might experience. And they can include some of these things here, which are not uncommon things, or they could include even other things. But some of the things it might be important to take stock of and to be on the lookout for, should you be experiencing some challenges, is the degree to which you find yourself fearful and worried, either about yourself or others. If you're not typically a person who worries a lot and you find yourself becoming very fretful and worried, chances are there might be something going on. You might be experiencing some signs of stress, and that's important to notice. You might notice changes in your sleeping or changes in your eating behavior. You might notice that you're not wanting to get out of bed in the morning in the same sort of way you might typically. Or when it comes to eating, you might find yourself excessively eating, almost turning to food as if it were to bring comfort. Some of these things might show itself in terms of having a really difficult time concentrating. Now, we all have our mind drift from time to time, and I would imagine that even during my presentation, some of you might find your thoughts somewhere else. That's okay, I understand that. But you all no doubt have a sense of what your baseline, what your typical is in terms of your ability to concentrate. And if things seem harder than that, perhaps that's a sign that you're experiencing some stress. Sometimes people might see themselves turning to increased use of alcohol, tobacco, cannabis, other substances or drugs when that might be out of character for them. Sometimes people might find themselves avoiding contacts and connections with friends, family, people who you're normally wanting to be with. For some, when we experience symptoms of stress, we might experience those things in our bodies, such that we might have a headache or stomach problems, or one might really experience a sense of tension in the shoulders, or one might have some digestive problems and so on. Those can be at times perhaps a sign that one is physically experiencing a problem, but they can also be a manifestation of or a sign of stress. Emotionally, people can find themselves crying more, and maybe that's not too typical for someone. Someone might find themselves feeling anxious, depressed, or even having panic attacks, really strong and significant feelings of panic or terror that are really quite uncommon for that individual. Or people can experience other sorts of emotions, again, that might be uncharacteristic. They might be feeling angry in a more frequent sense. They might be feeling guilty or helpless or confused. Sometimes when people become distressed, they actually feel a sense of numbness. Gee, I don't know what I'm feeling anymore. It's almost as if it's hard to read those things. Or people might find themselves becoming rather impatient. One doesn't have to experience all of these signs or symptoms. You might have just 2 or 3 of them, or hopefully if you're in the green zone, you might not be having many of these at all. The point is that when you're stressed, something feels different. And it's really important, and it's the most important first step, that you pay attention to what am I experiencing? And if any of those things here in any way seem out of the ordinary or feel different, then perhaps that's the sign that you need to be thinking about, oh gee, I might be experiencing some signs of stress here. Maybe I need to take good care of myself. Maybe this might even impact my own mental health and well-being. So let's turn the conversation a little bit more to mental health. Mental health is something that is talked about in our world, in our community all the time. And certainly in COVID, we've been talking about the impacts of the pandemic on mental health a lot. There's probably not a day that goes by when reading the newspaper or listening to the radio or listening to the news, I don't hear something about the struggles that people are having with respect to that sense of health and wellness and mental health and well-being. Now, I don't know that people are always talking about the same thing, but clearly they're talking about something that has changed how they feel. And that becomes important to pay attention to. So, in talking about mental health, it might be good to start with the idea of what is good mental health. I love the definition that the World Health Organization has in terms of good mental health. And they say that mental health is defined as a state of well being in which everyone realizes their own potential and they can cope with the normal stresses of life because there are always stresses in life. And in spite of those, they can work productively and fruitfully in whatever they wish to be doing so that they can make their contribution to their world, to their community. Um, Sometimes we think of a mental health problem as just a set of symptoms. I feel bad. And then maybe the absence of those symptoms means that one has good mental health. But this definition, as you can see, really speaks to something more broadly than that. Good mental health is about well-being. It's about being able to do what you need to do and want to do in the world to reach your potential. It's about coping with challenging times and still being able to make your contribution. So good mental health is about so much more than just not feeling bad, if you will. And then if we think about mental health problems, it's important to recognize that mental health problems can affect all aspects of our functioning. It can impact what our behaviors are. We might just find ourselves doing things in a very different way. It might impact our emotions and our feelings and how we experience, ourselves on the inside. Mental health problems can affect how we think. Our thoughts may be disrupted or disorganized or racing, or people's thoughts can become very bleak and dark and negative at times. Mental health problems can affect our relationships, or it can affect any combination of those things. The important point to take home here is that these problems can affect us in any of these domains, and that can really have an impact on your function. Remember the continuum I shared a moment ago. What differentiated green from yellow, from amber, from red, is the degree to which your functioning was impacted. So we know that stress and mental health problems can have an impact in all of these areas, and then that can impact your functioning. And I love this particular quotation. I don't know if we have anyone from the United Kingdom here today, but this came out of the UK, and it's captures so much. There is no health without mental health. If we're not feeling sort of strong and secure in our own sense of how we think about ourselves and how we feel and how we're able to function, then we can't be healthy. Healthy isn't just about having blood pressure that's not high. It's not just about being physically fit. It's not just about not having a disease or something that impacts our ability to walk and to move and so on. Health is about all of our health and well-being. And if some aspects of stress and its challenges and impacting on mental health is having an impact in your life, then there isn't health without mental health. So, as we said earlier, we know that stress impacts mental health, but it also makes us grow. And so the job is not really to avoid stress, because that's not really possible, because there's stress in everyday life and living. So to expect to avoid that is not going to be something that we can really do, because our job is to manage it. Because if we're trying to avoid stress, well, maybe life would be like this all the time. And wouldn't that be lovely? Here's another thing that you can Google, cute pet pictures, and you'll find probably 2 or 3 billion of those online. And as relaxed and as calm and as peaceful as the cat and the dog in that picture look, maybe that's not what the expectation should be for our everyday life. Maybe that's for weekends and vacations or time off. The important thing is that we have to manage our stress. Avoiding it's not possible, but we do need to manage it. And to manage it, of course, we need to have some tools. So I'm just going to get you to do a little something in your minds right now. And I'd like you to think of a time when you felt really challenged, when you really felt stressed, when you really were under a lot of pressure. So just take a moment and try to bring that to mind. I'll give you a few seconds to do so. Okay, so I'm sure you've all thought of a time in which things really seemed difficult and things really seemed challenging and stressed for you. So now think about what you did. Think about how you responded to that. Think about what did you learn about yourself? Think about what you learned that you could do in response to that. And ask yourself the question, did you get to a better place? I mean, if you're reflecting on a time in the past and you're in a better place now, then you must have done something to be able to get through that time, to get yourself to a better place. That speaks to your capacity. That speaks to your ability to do what you need to do to deal with challenging times. And really what we're talking about is a sense of resilience. And if we didn't have those really difficult times when we have to find something within ourselves to move forward, we wouldn't have grown in those ways. So you could substitute any of these words for that sense of resilience. It might be a fearlessness. It might be a determination. It might be a sense of resolve, a backbone. It might be a sense of grit or courage or daring. The point is that all of these words really speak to being able to do what one needs to do in the face of some challenge, to adapt in the face of adversity or trauma, significant sources of stress, or some threat that comes your way. It's that sense that when our back is up against the wall, as the expression goes, that's when we have to really need to do something to get through that situation. And sometimes when we go through those times and we bounce back, that can really lead to a sense of personal growth, of building ourselves and our capacity. So I know that stress is no fun. And sometimes it just feels really crappy and it gets in the way of things. And absolutely it does. And particularly when it's really intense, then we need to do all kinds of things to take care of ourselves. But there is that piece that when we go through difficult times, we kind of have to do something within ourselves to find it in ourselves to cope in a different sort of way. And when we do, that's when we grow. That's when we learn, and that's when we come to become resilient and thrive. Because we know that when we struggle with managing stress, it really can impact our mental health. So in this day and age, particularly as a student, as an international student, living through a global pandemic, the priority has really shifted to staying healthy and coping well. So I'd like to spend the rest of our time really focusing on some particular strategies that might be useful to navigate through what we need to do to cope with the stresses and challenges of these days. So everything starts with having a good, healthy routine. Now, I appreciate that some of this might seem really kind of basic. And it is, because sometimes the things that we need to do to take care of ourselves really are basic sort of things. They might be some things that, moms and dads and family members might have said along the way, but they're important just the same. It may take a little while to get past the stage of being a young person to realize that moms and dads did say some things that were important. I know for me, it took me a while to get to that place. But particularly if you're spending a lot of time at home because you're taking classes from home and studying from home, then the daily routine starts with doing what you need to do in the morning to get up and get on with things. But getting on with things might just mean moving from one room in the house to another room. Um, it's important to set your daily work hours and stick with them. Because when we blend back and forth between, oh, I think I'm just going to wander through my apartment or my house for a while, and oh, then I better get back to work, and then I'll wander around again. It's hard to feel a sense of that this is my time to do work. It becomes important in that daily routine to make sure you take a lunch break and to stop working at a certain time. Sometimes people find that what I do at the end of my workday, even though I'm in my home, right now I'm in my office to be doing this, I change my clothes at the end of the workday because that's my signal that I've actually stopped working for the day. And it's my signal to my family that dad isn't working right now. So it's not a problem to connect and engage as we might wish to. And sometimes in this world of 24-hour a day connection through text, through chat, through email, through notifications, our phones can be buzzing day and night. It's a healthy thing to do to turn off the notifications, to turn off the sound and the beeps and the buzzes and the vibrates and whatever else your phones and computers might do, so that you can have some time in the evening just to be able to sort of calm down and de-stress and get away from some of that. And even though it's good to have a daily routine, as I'm talking about, should something unexpected come up, by all means, not a problem to be a little flexible around that. Another really important thing is some basic self-care in terms of what we need to do physically to take care of ourselves. We all need some physical activity every day. It would be wonderful and super healthy of all of us to be able to get 30 minutes of activity a day. Now, that might mean simply walking around the block for 30 minutes. It might mean doing some, physical activity or yoga or a Zumba class online, from your bedroom. Anything like that is fine. It might mean just getting outdoors if you have a balcony on your apartment or in your home to get a little fresh air and doing something there. Really important, not only for the body, but for the mind. Staying hydrated, really important, excuse me. Not only does it help us keep our voice, but it helps all of the system work very well. It's not surprising that it is said that we all need maybe up to 8 liters of fluids, of liquids to drink daily. And the important thing to note there is that that's not liquids with caffeine in them. So coffee, Coca-Cola, those sorts of things, Pepsi, any fluid or drink that has caffeine in it actually takes out the same amount of fluid that goes into the body in terms of the volume of that drink. So non-caffeinated ways of staying hydrated keeps your brain active, it keeps your joints flexible, and all of those sorts of things. Here's another mom and dad thing. It's so important to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night. I appreciate how hard everyone is working, and it is so tempting late at night to say, I could just stay up for another hour to finish off what I need to finish off or to study a bit more for that exam. And I understand the logic of that. I can guarantee you, if you get 1 extra hour of sleep at night instead of staying up and losing an extra hour of sleep, the next day you will be more efficient, you will be more alert, and your brain and your mind will work better such that you gain that hour back. So never compromise your sleep, as easy and as tempting as it is to do. And every day, all of us need a little bit of fun and pleasure. Now that's hard when we're getting into the exam time and end of term and all the stresses. But even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes to be able to get some distraction, to do something for fun, whatever it might be, make sure you've got a few things on your list. And as we mentioned earlier, sometimes it's really easy to feel tempted by alcohol, tobacco, drugs of one sort. When it comes to trying to cope, these actually don't help people to cope. So might be best to avoid some of those if you're really feeling stressed. This particular notion in terms of embracing healthy thoughts, to my heart as a psychologist, I so resonate with all of this. and all the people that we work with. It really is important to be able to remember that we have control of what we think, to remember that we can change the thoughts that are in our heads, to remember that we've got the ability to see what we're thinking, to realize it might be having either a negative or a positive impact on us, and to shift that accordingly. Um, the image in the picture, you've got this. That's a very significant message of empowerment. And it's really important to have thoughts like that and to have messages and images like that around you. There are so many things that are changing in our world right now. And, some of those big things, it might be hard to do anything about. So we simply have to accept some of the changes that are happening, keep our focus on one thing at a time, to do what we need to do, and to remember that there's hope around every corner. As I asked you a moment ago, to think back to a really difficult time and to think about where you are now, you got past that difficult time. In the moment of that, however, you may not have felt very hopeful, but you got past it. So there is always hope, and don't forget that. And we can learn from the past, even from difficult things in the past. And we probably don't gain anything by thinking too far down the road of the future either, because the future is all about uncertainty. And if our thoughts go in that direction, chances are we'll feel kind of uncertain and then maybe a little stressed about that. So remember that you can focus your thoughts, you can focus on what's happening right now, what you need to do, and remember those messages. I've got this. I can do this. It's a difficult time right now. I know it is, but I'm going to be able to do this. I'm a smart person. I've got capacity. I can cope with this. Those thoughts are so important. It's also a healthy coping strategy to stay connected to the people who you care about and who care about you. Every day, it's important to reach out, even if we have to do it virtually, to the people in our lives who are meaningful to us. Because chances are when we do, we'll feel good about that. We'll feel a sense of support from them. We'll feel a sense of interest from them. And that just makes us feel good in general. So things that make us feel good are probably things that we should do. So through whatever means that one can do it, through whatever platform, and my goodness, there are so many different groups and opportunity for people of similar interests to come together. Now is really an important time to make sure that you don't isolate and that you connect as you need to with friends. Now, I suspect, although I don't know anything about things like this, that the news media and the people who invest in them in terms of making money in stock markets and things like that have probably made a bundle this year. Because what are we all doing, whenever we can, is we're turning on the news, we're trying to see what the latest news is about, COVID, about cases today, about, all of those things. And for many of you from other parts of the world, I suspect it's even more important to be trying to catch up on the news from home. There's a downside to all of that. And the downside is that some of that can be really stressful. It can really sort of, agitate and elevate, one's sense of one's ability to sort of stay calm and stay self-regulated. I might suggest that even though there are news channels that are on 24 hours a day, who knows where all the news comes from, and even though there are dozens and dozens and dozens of channels, we probably all could get caught up in the way that we need to with 20 minutes of news a day, and probably best to get it from news sources that you can trust. World Health Organization has a great news feed about COVID, the Public Health Agency of Canada, or maybe one of the legitimate and respected news organizations in whatever parts of the world you may be from. Never a good idea to read the news just before you go to bed or to look online. At that point, we need to be doing all of those sorts of things to slow down our thoughts, to calm things down, to not be overly stimulated. So try to catch your news earlier in the day. And it's really important, particularly during times when we don't feel that there's much that we can control, to have a sense of purpose. Now, for many of you, your purpose will be getting an excellent education, and that's wonderful. That's a beautiful purpose. Sometimes it might be important to find other things that one can feel a sense of purpose around. It might be through helping others. It might be through trying to be proactive, thinking ahead to something and doing what you need to do. It might be just working towards your goals, whatever they might be, related to school, related to your family, related to maybe learning a skill in terms of a game or a leisure pursuit that you're involved in. Finding a purpose sometimes involves learning something about oneself, discovering something that might be really important to learn and to strengthen and to grow, just like that flower. And sometimes we need to find a cause, something that we're passionate about, and that helps us to contribute. When you think about any of these things, as we pursue whatever that purpose might be, we feel more of a sense of control. We are feeling more in control. And remember that image of COVID, overtaking the world? That's scary. When I look at that, I feel out of control. So it's all the more important to find something you can control so that some of those realities of our time don't overwhelm you. Now, one of my favorite coping strategies is a really easy thing, and any of us can probably do it anywhere along the way. Now, I know that all of you are very smart and bright and capable people. You've probably got a good head on your shoulders and a good sense of imagination. So this particular coping strategy involves visualization, using your imagination to bring something to life. So what I would suggest is you identify a place, some place in your life, some place you've been or some place you've thought about that you really associate with a sense of peace, of calm, of something very positive. It might be a particular scene back home. It might be, a nice, beach that you've been to somewhere. It might be on a mountaintop. It might be looking at the face of someone you love. It could be anything. The point is, what I'd like you to do when you need to use this strategy is to take a moment, if you're comfortable, to close your eyes and to think about that particular place. But not just think about it, I'd like you to bring it to life using each of your senses. So for me, it's a particular beach that I like to go to. So I see that. I see the blue water. I see the blue skies. I hear it in terms of, I hear the waves crashing on the sand, the rhythm of the waves. I can touch it because I can feel the sand underneath me. I can feel the sand, in my toes when I'm walking barefoot. I can smell the smell of the ocean. And as I'm thinking about all of those things, I'm transporting myself to that place. I'm bringing it to life in such a way that it is consuming what is in my thoughts in that moment. And when you do that, when you get lost in that image, and particularly while you're doing that, you just pay attention to breathing in through the nose, a deep breath, holding it, breathing out through your mouth, in through the nose, hold it, out through the mouth. I guarantee you, if you spend 60 seconds, we all have 60 seconds, bringing to mind that place, imagining it in all the ways that you need to, you will be able to find yourself to come to a place of calm. Now, we're just coming to the end of our presentation, and I just wanted to make a couple of more points. Number one, when it comes to your own culture, there are many places and many things that you could use that helps with your coping if you bring something from home. It might be particular recipes, it might be certain routines or practices, it may be music that you are familiar with, that you grew up with, any reminders or souvenirs or things that help you to remember something of your own culture. Chances are that that will be something that's very important. A final couple words. I know as a student, a big part of your role is to be productive and to work on your schooling and to do as well as you can. And of course, that's important. But remember, we're human beings, not just human doings. We always need to remember the importance of being kind to oneself, being compassionate, um, making sure that how we speak to ourselves, how we treat ourselves, is how we would treat a friend and a loved one. And why would we do it otherwise? And also keep in mind that universities want all of our students to be successful, not just academically, but socially, developmentally, and in terms of health and well-being. What did we say earlier? Healthy students are better learners. And when we can focus on what we need to stay healthy, then we can stay with our programs, we can graduate from year to year, we can complete our degrees, and we can move forward to launch into whatever your careers and future contributions are going to be. And each of your universities, and I would encourage you to check your websites, each of the colleges and universities in the province have a variety of health and wellness services. They may be counseling services, they may be medical services. And I know that all schools, because the provincial government has supported them, have created a number of resources like Good to Talk. It's a 24/7, 365 counseling line that one can call that 833 number, 9 o'clock this evening, 2 o'clock in the morning. If you need to speak with a counselor, there will be one at the other end of the line, and you can use that and you can check that out. Just a couple of other things to keep in mind. Usually most international students have health insurance coverage for additional health supports that you may need. Sometimes you may need to access services through an interpreter, and many times those supports and services have interpreters. And never forget our international student supports when it comes to advising, immigration advising, and any other programs and activities. All of those things exist for our schools around the province. So what did we say about mental health? Good mental health is a state of well-being in which everyone gets to realize their own potential. They can cope with things, they can work in all the ways that they need to in the world to feel productive, because that's how they make a contribution. And all of that contributes to a sense of resilience, which is more important now than it has ever been. So that brings me to the end, and I'm happy to take a bit of time if people are interested to respond to any comments or questions that folks would like to make, and Jennifer can perhaps help with that too.
Great. And while people are collecting their thoughts and questions, I just wanted to extend a very warm thank you to you, Dr. Pilon, for being here with us today. I know that certainly we are also hearing from many international students across the province, that they're really feeling isolation, stress, wanting to feel a bit more supported and connected. So whatever we can do for international students together, I think collectively that's what makes our province and all of our institutions pretty special. And I want to also encourage all of the international students to reach out to your campuses. And David, you mentioned that all campuses do have career services. We've actually put together a great resource. We've summarized some of those, and we'll be sharing it with everyone in the chat box and also online. And the other thing that we have, and again, while I'm talking, I encourage people to ask some questions if you have any, because we do have a couple minutes for questions. I just also wanted to mention another great resource that's out there. It's the Healthy Minds Nova Scotia, which is a provincial resource, again, with online fantastic resources. And we also have some really great things coming up as well. One called Bright. So Bright is a local company. They do online health and wellness. They offer virtual well-being programs and self-care online. And they actually have some cool things like videos, live courses on fitness, mindfulness, nutrition, yoga, keynote speakers. And Edunova, along with our members, we are going to be supporting all international students in the province this month by providing you with free access for 2 weeks from December 15th to the 31st to online Bright courses. So stay tuned for that. And we will email you information, and I'll just check the chat box. I don't see any questions coming up in Q&A. I know my colleague Aris has shared a couple of resources there. Now, David, I did get one, somebody sent us one through email earlier. If I can ask you that, I can read it out to you. So the question was, What strategies do people have to avoid winter depression for 5-year-old kids and for married couples? So two very different demographics.
Okay, winter depression. So sometimes we consider that seasonal affective disorder, and it's important to note that because the days get shorter in the winter, because it's harder to get outdoors and do all the things we might normally do in warmer weather, it may be the case that people don't always feel so great in the winter. It doesn't have to mean that someone is actually experiencing depression, but it just may mean that things feel a little sluggish and slow. So with respect to 5-year-olds and with respect to couples, I would think any of the things that we talked about here in terms of taking good care of oneself, in terms of having a little bit of fun in every day. 5-year-olds need fun a lot more than the few minutes. Making sure that there's entertainment and amusement and all of those sorts of things for children are important, just as it is to get outside and get some fresh air. And sooner or later we'll be having snow and the opportunities for skating perhaps, or tobogganing, or playing in the snow. Children typically love those sorts of things. So sometimes as a parent, it's just an important thing to do to support our children, to provide them a sense of security and safety, but also to give them a sense of fun and to contribute to things that we can do with them that we know are enjoyable for them and are enjoyable for us. And then we get to look back on that rather fondly, and those become healthy sorts of things that build relationships and strengthen families. For married couples, sometimes we have to put the 5-year-old to bed. Sometimes we have to make sure that we commit, the time that we need with our partner on a regular and day-to-day basis. Even when life is really busy, it's nice just to be able to turn things off, even for a short period of time during December and end of term and exams and so on, to remember your partner, to remember what brought you together in the first place, to remember what you were attracted to, and to find the things that no doubt you have in common in terms of your interests, and prioritize a little bit of that time, even if it's just talking to each other, even if it's watching a series on TV or on the computer or on Netflix. And it's important to remember to keep the lines of communication open. Being able to say to one's partner, if you're really stressed, if you're really challenged or frustrated, I'm so stressed and challenged right now, I feel like pulling my hair out. This is what I need from you. And it might not be anything more than needing our partner to hear us, to be there for us, and to give us a hug. So all of those basic sorts of things are usually helpful, maybe even more so in the winter months than at other times of year.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions from anyone else? We've got about one or two more minutes. And David, I don't know if you can see the chat. There's a comment here. Someone had to leave, but they said, I feel more comfortable after I listened to your presentation. And I do have to say, listening to your voice even is very comforting. Even I've got a couple of cats here, and it's very soothing. So thank you for that.
There you go. That's kind.
Question here.
Yeah, I see the question here about how do we actively choose to think positively. I think I have a type A personality, and I'm inclined to always plan things out. I've been told I have a negative mindset, but my philosophy is to plan for the worst and hope for the best. Okay, I've heard that a lot from people over my career. And, there is something to be said if you plan for the worst and hope for the best. But when you plan for the worst, you're always anticipating misery. You're always anticipating a negative outcome and a sense of something that might give you a feeling of dread as you go through time to get to that outcome. While it's important to be prepared, I might suggest that instead of planning for the worst, you trust your ability to cope with whatever comes up. Because I bet you can look back on many circumstances in life and say, well, actually, I dealt with that one rather well. Or, oh, I remember that time that was so difficult. Oh, but I did what I needed to do to get through that. So trust your ability that you'll manage again in the future at a difficult moment, maybe without having to plan for the worst, um, and hoping for the best. If I close my eyes at the end of the day and I think to tomorrow and think, I bet tomorrow's going to be a good day. Really hope it is. I'm looking forward to something nice happening, even if I don't know what it is. I will fall asleep more easily and I will sleep, no doubt, more comfortably throughout the night because I've taken my mind to that place. So that goes to your comment about actively choosing to think positively. Don't want to bore you too much with this detail, but we all can ask ourselves the question, when I think about this, whatever this might be, say it's a negative thing. When I think about this, how do I feel? Well, when I think about all the work I might have to do, or when I think about somewhere nearby is my to-do list, I get really kind of stressed and upset about that, to be honest. I have to keep a to-do list or I forget about things. But if I just thought about it, chances are it would distract me from what I'm doing in the moment and would make it harder for me to get through whatever I'm doing in the moment, and it wouldn't feel very good. So um, instead, if you ask yourself, if I don't feel very good when I think this, then what's the point of me thinking this? Um, we all have control about what happens between the ears. We truly do. Now, sometimes it's hard to turn down some of the volume of those thoughts, but we have control over that. We can put something else in its place instead of thinking about that thing that makes us feel bad. So if you recognize that you're having a thought and you don't feel good about it, then you are in the driver's seat to be able to change that. And so that's an important thing to do. So you need to remember that. You need to ask yourself the question, do I feel good when I think that? And you need to think about, as I said a moment ago, that future sense that I can maybe trust myself to deal with what I need to deal with should something not so good happen. But for now, I'm just going to hope that good things, will happen for the most part because I feel better when I do. That's a philosophy shift. That's a head shift, but it's one most people are capable of. So hopefully I've addressed all the parts to that question.
That's a great question. Any
Absolutely.
other questions? I know we're over time now. We're at about 4:15, and we will share these resources as well with everyone because I know there's a lot in here. So you can watch this over the holidays and digest some of this. Check out these resources, David. Like you said, I wrote down one of the quotes from you. There isn't health without mental health, and I think that is so important. How
Mhm.
much our bodies are connected to our minds, and again, I just want to say thank you for being here, and thank you to all of the students who are here today, taking time to be here and be here for yourselves. We will keep you connected and we'll send you more information about upcoming webinars and the Bright passes that we'll be providing for everyone should they want it. And David, thanks again.
My pleasure. Good luck all and compliments of the season.
Great.